economy. If this financing stopped, then the U.S. economy could face collapse. And this means that these young men could not afford their OnlyFans anymore, and this could lead to a revolution in the.
In this clip, Piers Morgan sits down with Professor Jang, and things get interesting fast. The predictions he lays out, along with the reasoning behind them, catch Piers so off guard that he basically brushes it off by the end. But before you write it off too, it's worth knowing this man has a track record of calling things correctly before, more than once. Let's roll the full clip first, and I'll save my take for after. See you on the other side.
Professor Jang is a game theorist, best known for his popular predictive history YouTube channel, where he applies his systems of analysis to the past in order to predict the future. Back in 2024, he predicted that Trump would win the presidency, that Trump would go to war with Iran, and that the US would lose that war. Must have sparked a flurry of interest in both his work and his rather colourful adjacent opinions. Professor Jang joins me now. Professor Jang, thank you very much indeed for joining me on Uncensored.
Hi, Piers.
Let me start with these three big predictions, because you've been proven obviously completely right about two of them, and the third one is now unfurling before our eyes. Are you confident that you'll be proven right with the third prediction, that Iran ultimately will prevail in this war?
Right. So right now, the United States and Iran are fighting a war of attrition. The United States is trying to degrade Iran's military capacity, and Iran is trying to strangle the world economy. And it turns out that Iran is putting a lot of pressure on the GCC. And I think at the end of the day, the United States will be compelled to send ground forces. Once the United States sends in ground forces, there's no turning back. It's all in. The sunk cost fallacy kicks in. It'll be another Vietnam for the United States, because Iran is a mountain fortress. And the United States right now doesn't have the manpower, the manufacturing capacity, and the political will to fight a long war of attrition on the ground in Iran.
Right. So I think because of what you've said at the end there, it's highly unlikely that Trump would commit ground forces, because he's always pledged not to. And I think he would see the inherent danger of that. So if he doesn't commit ground forces, how do you see this war playing out?
Well, right now, if Trump doesn't commit ground troops, he does have a variety of options. The first option is just to simply declare victory and call it a day. Unfortunately, the problem with that is that U.S. bases are still exposed. The GCC economies are still under pressure. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. And there are no signs that Iran is interested in peace negotiations. Iran feels as though it has the upper hand because it has the political will and the resources to draw this war out. Now, let's assume that Trump does withdraw from the Middle East. Then what happens is that the GCC nations of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, UAE now are forced to pay a ransom to Iran, because they supply the world with their oil through the Strait of Hormuz. 20% of the world's oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz. But in return, they get food. So the GCC nations import anywhere from 80 to 90% of their food from overseas. And so basically, the center of gravity shifts from the petrodollar to whatever financial system that Iran wants to focus on. And it could be BRICS, it could be gold, it could be anything. But remember, the problem with that is that the US economy is a Ponzi scheme. It's dependent on the GCC investing in AI, in tech stocks, in startups like Uber, in order to finance the US economy. If this financing stopped, then the US economy could face collapse. And this means that these young men could not afford their OnlyFans anymore, and this could lead to a revolution in the streets. So the consequences for America would be dire, if America were to retreat from the Middle East.
I mean, it seems that the key part of all this sort of economic strangulation, if you like, by Iran is the Strait of Hormuz. We've already seen in the last few hours today that the successor to Ayatollah Khomeini, his son, has come out. Apparently, we haven't seen him or heard from him directly, but there's a statement in which he talks about keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed indefinitely. If that was to happen, what would be the consequences for the global economy, and how soon would we see those consequences?
Well, I mean, the consequences would be dire because cheap energy, cheap petroleum products are the very basis of the global modern economy. So it just wouldn't be jet fuel that would be affected. It would also be food because remember, food is produced by fertilizer, which comes from the GCC as well as sulfuric acid, which helps the process of some semiconductor production. So artificial intelligence, food production, global travel are all dependent on products from the GCC. It's only been 2 weeks that the Strait of Hormuz has been closed for almost 2 weeks now, and already we're seeing high oil prices surpassing $100 a barrel. Iran says that they want to move it to $20 a barrel, which signals that they want the Strait of Hormuz closed for months. Now, remember, even if Iran were to open up the Strait of Hormuz, it would take weeks before oil production continues. So I think for the global economy, I think we've reached the point of no return. And in the future, global economies have to commit to a bit of deindustrialization and even mercantilism in order to survive future shocks. So if you go to Southeast Asia, Vietnam and Thailand have already ordered the government workers to work from home in order to save fuel.
You've pointed out that the Gulf Cooperation Council monarchies, the GCC, as you've alluded to several times here, are structurally unusual states because they're propped up by oil, desalination. They don't have their own water supply naturally, and American protection. You say correctly, they were built in open desert with no food security, as you said, 80% imported, no water security, the desalination dependency, no geographic defenses, they're flat, exposed terrain, no demographic cohesion. In places like Dubai, for example, 90% of the population are expats, and no independent security architecture reliant on the US, who have bases obviously in many of the states there. If you put all this together, is what's happening now in terms of the tactics that Iran are deploying, including the threats to desalination, but also targeting, obviously, targeted hotels and airports and so on, going to the heart of what the states there would like to see as the future of their economy, which is tourism, sport, entertainment, clearly designed to scare people away from that. Is this now representing an existential threat, do you think, to the business model of the GCC states going forward?
Right. So the most vulnerable city and often the most glamorous city in the GCC is Dubai. And for many years, Dubai has been very successful in cultivating an image as the new city of London, as the new Hong Kong of the Middle East. And thousands of these millionaires flock to Dubai for the glamorous lifestyle as well as the tax-free aspect of the city. But the reality is that this was all premised on global peace, on Pax Americana, on the capacity of America to project power all around the world and provide security guarantees to the GCC. Now this aura of inevitability and invincibility of American empire has been shattered. And once an illusion is shattered, there's actually no coming back from this. And that's what people don't really appreciate about this war. This war is not just directed at Israel. This war is not directed just at the GCC and the illusion of American empire. This war is directed at American empire itself. And what people don't appreciate is the eschatological aspects of this war, in that Iran sees a moral duty, a moral imperative from God to destroy the great Satan, which is the American empire. And the base of the American empire, of course, is the global economy.
Right. At the heart and the head of the American economy is the President of the United States. You've argued that Trump is not the most powerful person in America, and you've inferred that actually the real power base is Israel. Explain that.
Right. So I actually don't say the real power base is Israel. What I say is that the real power base are a collection of secret societies that have an eschatological view of this war. And these secret societies include the Freemasons, which are now called the Rosicrucians and the Knights Templars. They include Jewish organizations called the Sephardim Frankists, who are embedded in religious movements called Shabbat Lubavitch. And then you have the Jesuits. You have a collection of secret societies. And they believe that a war in the Middle East would start a process that would culminate in the end times and the return of Jesus, the arrival of the Jewish Messiah, the building of a one world government. They have different eschatologies, but a lot of their time frames do align. So where they converge is that there has to be a war in the Middle East to kick things off. This war in the Middle East will lead to the defeat of the American Empire, and this will lead to the culmination of the Greater Israel Project, where Israel is able to control the Middle East from the Nile to the Euphrates. Once the Greater Israel Project is in place, it will transform into the Pax Judaica, which is an AI surveillance state. This will eventually lead to the war of Gog and Magog, the destruction of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the building of the Third Temple, the return of the Jewish diaspora to Jerusalem, and the arrival of the Jewish Messiah or the Antichrist. So they have the scripted out. And unfortunately, a lot of world events are conforming to this script.
Right. I mean, a lot of people say a lot of what you've just said is a load of fantastical baloney and driven by anti-Semitic tropes. What do you say to that?
Look, I completely sympathize with this argument. 5 years ago, I would have said the same thing about this sort of argument and thinking. So what I do is predictive modeling, okay? Meaning that I'm going to throw some theories out there. And then based on these theories, I'm going to extrapolate into the future and see what the predictions are. If these predictions are correct, then my theories ought to have some legitimacy. Now, when I teach, I don't engage in historical analysis. I engage in speculative analysis. And so in 2024, 2 years ago, I did say that this war in Iran would happen, and I provided a lot of my analysis. And a part of my analysis that's very important is the eschatological analysis, meaning that Christian Zionists control the United States. There's a preacher called John Hagee who runs an organization called Christians United for Israel, which has about 7 million members. Christian Zionists are heavily embedded in the national security apparatus and in the Pentagon. There's reporting that U.S. commanders have told their troops that this is a war to bring back Jesus and to be not afraid. So that's my argument. Like, I don't want to believe this, but because this war in Iran is happening, I'm forced to conclude that some of my speculative analysis has validity. Otherwise,
well, I think to be honest, I think the word speculation doesn't quite do it justice. I mean, look, there's no doubt your predictions so far have been proven to be uncannily accurate in relation to Trump winning and then going to war with Iran. But I think the idea that this is all part of a plot to bring back Jesus Christ, look, there might be some people out there that carry such a phrase. I think it's highly unlikely, unless any evidence emerges to the contrary, that they are current commanders in the United States military. But Professor Jang, you have a big following. Lots of people are interested in your predictive analysis, and it's good to have you on Uncensored. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Piers.
I actually want to hear from you guys on this one. Am I reading too much into it? Or did Piers seem to just wave off everything Professor Jang laid out? Tell me honestly in the comments if I'm off base here, because from where I'm sitting, it looked like a flat-out dismissal, and that rubbed me the wrong way. Here's why it bothers me. Professor Jang has built a huge following, largely because so much of what he's forecasted throughout this conflict has actually played out the way he said it would. So I'm sitting here wondering why Piers chose to frame the conversation the way he did, throwing out lines about it sounding like nonsense or leaning into anti-Semitic tropes. That's not what this is. This is someone working from data, running the analysis, and reaching conclusions based on that. It didn't sit right with me. Honestly, it came across as disrespectful, unnecessarily sharp, and just dismissive for no real reason. I keep turning it over in my head, trying to figure out the why behind it. One theory I keep coming back to, maybe it's connected to Professor Jang's actual conclusion, which was that America would end up losing this war. And if Piers is functioning as basically a mouthpiece for Trump and MAGA messaging, that might explain the need to shut the conversation down, especially given how large and global Jang's audience actually is. Full disclosure, I'm part of that audience myself. I follow his breakdowns closely. But here's what doesn't add up for me. Why bring someone on your show who has a strong track record of being right, only to dismiss the one prediction that matters most? Because there's already reporting out there suggesting the picture America's painting of this war isn't quite matching reality. I've said this before on this channel, and I'll say it again. What does winning even mean for America in this context? Because for Iran, simply surviving and continuing to hold their ground counts as winning. And right now, they're doing exactly that. So that's my read on it. The dismissiveness just didn't sit well with me. Let me know if you see it differently, or if I'm missing something here. Drop your take in the comments below. And if you're down there anyway, do me a solid. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and help this video reach more people. Appreciate every one of you, and I'll catch you in the next one.